Hello, and welcome to A Book a Day. Today's summarized book for you is You Just Don't Understand. Women and Men in Conversation. Complaints like "you just don't get me" frequently occur in intimate relationships, and we might feel that men and women sometimes seem like two entirely different species, struggling to communicate with each other. Small issues can lead to arguments and resentment, while larger ones can result in breakups or divorces. This book points out that there exists a gender dialect between the sexes, with men and women using different language logics. Women tend to be better at emotional communication, while men tend to excel at report-style communication, which often leads to misunderstandings in their conversations. The book's author, Deborah Tannen, is a renowned American sociolinguist. To write this book, she conducted extensive research and observed the thought processes and expression logic of both sexes. The book remained on the New York Times bestseller list for 8 months, has been translated into 31 languages, and received much feedback. Many readers claim that this book has saved their marriages to a certain extent. For intimate relationships, you can treat this book as a communication guide between you and your partner. In terms of social life, you can gain insight into the principles behind misunderstandings and hostility in everyday life and work, effectively adjusting your mindset and smoothing out your relationships with others. Next, I will interpret this book for you in 3 parts. First, let's get to know 2 distinct communication styles: emotional communication and report-style communication. In the second and third parts, I will take you through a deeper understanding of these communication styles, examining their respective strengths and limitations in different scenarios. So, during the following 20-minute talk, I strongly recommend you do 2 things. First, please follow my narration to identify your own communication style. Second, I invite you to set aside your emotions, put yourself in the other person's shoes, and familiarize yourself with the communication style you are not accustomed to. I believe that after 20 minutes, you will have gained a deeper insight into communication. Let's get started. Part 1 of the core idea of this book were to be summarized in 1 sentence. It would be: men and women have different purposes for talking and communicating, which is an important reason for the failure of communication between the sexes. Generally, women use language to build connections, focusing more on intimacy and excelling in emotional communication. Men, on the other hand, use language to establish status, pursuing independence, and are often better at report-style communication. Let's look at them one by one. First, let's examine emotional communication, which women are generally better at. The purpose of emotional communication is to express care for others, with the focus on the feelings of both parties. The speaker shares their own feelings while also considering the listener's feelings. The author offers a simple judgment method. If you feel at ease when speaking privately, your communication style is likely emotional communication. Emotional communication is often a communication style women excel in. As the name suggests, emotional communication sees conversation as a means to build emotional connections and coordinate relationships, with the emphasis on showcasing similarities and matching experiences between the 2 parties. Even in the most public settings, women may organize their speeches using intimate exchanges based on sharing their own experiences. Next, let's look at report-style communication, which men are generally better at. The purpose of report-style communication is to maintain one's independence and freedom. Those accustomed to report-style communication are skilled at using speech to attract others' attention. If you feel more comfortable when speaking publicly, your communication style likely leans towards report-style communication. Report-style communication is often what men excel in. For most men, in a hierarchical social order, language is used to maintain independence, negotiate, and uphold status. Men are more accustomed to showcasing their knowledge and skills through verbal expression, such as telling stories, making jokes, and imparting information, to become the center of attention in a crowd. Even in the most intimate settings, they might deliver a report as if they were speaking publicly. So, do women who are accustomed to report-style communication and men who are better at using emotional communication exist? Of course, they do. Moreover, outstanding communicators almost always use both communication strategies. For example, a male psychologist might be closer to emotional communication compared to his previous communication style, quickly winning the trust of others due to his warmth and empathy. Meanwhile, a confident woman or one engaged in business management and public speaking will skillfully use the logic of report-style communication. Her words will be not only infectious but also authoritative. However, overall, there is a clear tendency for women and men to have distinct speaking logics. If someone wants to make friends and establish friendly relationships with those around them, men often focus on whether they hold a higher position in the group's hierarchical structure, with friendly relationships serving as a means to greater power. On the other hand, women pay attention to whether they occupy a more central position in the intimate network, with friendly relationships being the goal in and of itself. In fact, these speaking styles for men and women are learned during childhood when they develop friendships with their same-sex peers. For girls, conversation serves as the glue that strengthens relationships, and they may exclude children who are very different from them. Boys, on the other hand, maintain emotional connections through conflict, which may involve fighting or engaging in competitive sports. When discussing certain activities, they also prefer topics filled with conflict, such as sports and politics. As men and women grow older, these communication patterns are further consolidated in their friendships with their same-sex peers. Part 2. In the first part, we have roughly understood the differences between the two communication modes. In the second part, we will focus on the reporting style communication that men tend to use more often. Let's first look at the advantages of reporting style communication. There is a relatively loving couple, with the husband, Stuart, being a reporting style communicator and the wife, Rebecca, being an emotional style communicator. In private settings, Stuart is silent while Rebecca talks non-stop, but in public settings, the situation reverses. Whenever there are parent meetings or community committee events, Stuart is always the one to step up and speak. Rebecca avoids speaking like an ostrich, as she imagines that others might not like what she says, or they might find her voice unpleasant, and she doesn't like being judged. If she gathers the courage to say something, she needs time to organize her thoughts and waits to be called upon. She doesn't want to put herself in the center of the stage, subject to the scrutiny of the audience. Meanwhile, the previously silent Stuart can stand up directly and calmly say what he thinks in front of a group of strangers. In using speech to attract the attention of others, men are more adept than women, which is also the core difference between reporting style and emotional style communication. The benefits of being good at reporting style communication are obvious. You can gain stronger influence, be quickly noticed, and gain prestige and influence in school, the workplace, or even in social activities. Stuart is not an exception. Indeed, men tend to be the first to ask questions during the Q&A session after a speech, and their speaking frequency is also higher. In private settings, men may feel that women are more trivial. The fewer the listeners, the more familiar the people are with each other, and the more equal the status of the listeners and speakers, the more it resembles emotional style communication. In public settings, women may feel that men are a bit boastful. This is because the more people involved in the conversation, the more unfamiliar they are with each other, and the greater the status difference between the listener and the speaker, the closer the conversation is to reporting style communication, which is the speaking style men are accustomed to. In situations where men feel their status is being challenged or need to deter the crowd, they become eloquent and talk incessantly. The author believes that this reasoning can also explain a stereotype. Many men think that women lack a sense of humor and hardly ever tell jokes. In reality, it's not that women don't tell jokes, but that men don't hear those jokes because women are used to intimate emotional style communication and don't tell jokes to unfamiliar people. Women prefer to tell jokes to their same-sex friends, as it's part of the private information shared between close friends. The essence of telling jokes is actually a form of self-display, requiring the speaker to seize the center stage and demonstrate their abilities, with the pressure not unlike making a public speech. Men are more familiar with establishing connections by entertaining others. Furthermore, the person telling the joke is the speaker, and others are the listeners, particularly when joking about someone. It's an act that places oneself in a higher position, demonstrating the ability to be an informed and controlling party. Making others laugh gives you the temporary power to suppress them. In the moment of laughter, a person is temporarily incapacitated. Sometimes, some men will choose not to laugh in situations that may or may not be funny to show authority and hostility. Women accustomed to emotional style communication are reluctant to tell jokes to men because doing so would give men an opportunity to judge them. If the male listener remains stone-faced, the joke teller loses face. which, in the eyes of women, is not worth it. However, the problem is that if women are always accustomed to playing the role of the listener and never the joke teller, this inequality in public settings will continue to spread, and women will increasingly lose their voice, becoming a character who only smiles, nods, and applauds. Next, let's look at the limitations of reporting style communication. For example, Martha bought a computer, and the male salesperson guiding her made her feel like the dumbest person in the world. He used various technical terms to explain things, and she had to stop and ask what each term meant. Asking questions made her feel incompetent, and his answers were impatient. He seemed to be constantly emphasizing one message: I am an expert, I am smart. You don't understand. You are dumb. You're inferior to me. In the end, Martha left in a panic. This interaction left a shadow on Martha, and the male salesperson didn't really explain how to use the computer at all. This male salesperson is obviously someone accustomed to reporting style communication, using his speech to show that he possesses more information, knowledge, or skills, and is on the advantage side. However, in a customer service setting, doing so is very foolish and unprofessional. As a subject matter expert, the author Tannen mentioned her feelings during academic exchanges, feeling that male students' questions were always aggressive. Through interviews, she discovered that young men often think it's natural to challenge an expert, and they try to undermine her authority by questioning. Tannen said that although this questioning and challenging can express a kind of respect and even be constructive for academic exchanges, the problem is that when she feels challenged and attacked, she doesn't want to give any answers and refuses to play the game of academic wrestling. Tannen's experience serves as a wake-up call for those who only use reporting style communication. The expressions of respect and disgust can sometimes be very similar. Sometimes, when no one wants to refute someone, it may not be out of respect, but rather because they are repelled or afraid of them. In intimate relationships, men's reporting style communication is often interpreted by women, who are generally more adept at expressing their feelings, as being insensitive. This leads to men often having less say in intimate relationship communication. Tannen's advice is, when facing someone who uses emotional style communication, please understand that when they are sharing the details of their life, or even past pains, it is their way of trying to express friendliness towards you. What you need to do is simple: look at the other person, listen carefully, use empathy to actively seek similarities between you, and don't rush to teach them. We just mentioned one point: looking at the other person. Why do men need to pay particular attention to this? It's because men often instinctively interpret eye contact as hostility and sexual implications. Compared to women, men in conversation tend to look elsewhere, appearing less engaged, which may be their way of avoiding awkwardness. Men's engagement is reflected in body language rather than eye contact. They are more accustomed to performing similar actions in the same direction as someone they like at the same time, like two swans preening their feathers. They may seem to be ignoring each other, but they are actually mirroring each other's actions in a synchronized rhythm to show we are friends. Part 3. Now that we have covered reporting style communication, let's take a look at emotional style communication. First, let's understand the advantages of emotional style communication. Emotional style communication is not limited to interactions among friends and family. It is the best approach for one-on-one communication between strangers. Do you remember the story of Martha from earlier? Martha bought a computer and the male salesperson, intentionally or unintentionally, made her feel inferior. Fortunately, the story didn't end there. A few days later, Martha gathered the courage to return to the store for help. And this time, a female salesperson assisted her. The female salesperson was very friendly, avoided using technical jargon, and whenever it appeared, she immediately explained it in the simplest and clearest terms, making sure Martha could keep up. This female salesperson may have been a professional service provider, but it's also possible that her behavior was due to her years of experience communicating with others. Women tend to value interpersonal relationships more, and they are motivated to minimize the gap between their own and others' professional knowledge and skills, making every effort to help us understand them. This way, they convey the meta-communication of "I support you" rather than "I disdain you." For those accustomed to emotional style communication, the purpose of dialogue is to maintain similarity between people, and sharing knowledge helps balance the scores between both parties. They feel stronger and more satisfied when they realize they have helped others, and their community or group becomes stronger. Emotional style communication believes that conversation is for building emotional connections and coordinating relationships, with an emphasis on highlighting similarities and matching experiences between both parties. As a result, women are often the core force in maintaining a large family. Next, let's look at the disadvantages of emotional style communication. Emotional style communication may impose too heavy an emotional burden on others. A man in a relationship was tormented because his girlfriend talked too much. He said, "I feel that my fleeting thoughts are meaningless, and so are those of others." This is what happened. At the beginning of their relationship, his girlfriend constantly expressed her worries and fears, questioning whether she could trust him, if she would lose herself in the relationship, whether it was suitable for her, and so on. The man felt that his girlfriend was talking too much, and that she should keep these doubts to herself and wait to see how things would unfold. In fact, they got along very well, and his girlfriend was satisfied, but he was left with lingering issues. He was constantly exhausted, trying to explain and prove himself to address his girlfriend's concerns, feeling like a yo-yo tied to her consciousness, bouncing around and feeling dizzy. He believed that her habit of casually sharing her fleeting thoughts had permanently damaged their relationship. For women who constantly confide in their partners, it's crucial to recognize that they may be underestimating the impact of their words on their significant others. Men are not invincible, and they can be hurt by women's words too. Sometimes, men may appear numb or indifferent in communication because women repeatedly use emotionally charged language to pressure them. By the way, it's suddenly apparent that this case is memorable because the man, uncharacteristically, used emotional style communication to express his own pain, which is rare among men. Lastly, Tannen offers advice for those who use emotional style communication. As a woman, she believes that the key to change lies within women themselves. The media has criticized how men dominate meetings and women's voices are not valued in the workplace. However, Tannen thinks that men are innocent in this regard, as the primary reason is that the workplace is a setting for reporting style communication, which naturally favors men. But she advocates that both men and women who are more accustomed to emotional style communication can force themselves to speak up without invitation, without seeking a certain level of politeness, and women can certainly interrupt others boldly. Adjustments shouldn't be one-sided though. Men should also understand that in the workplace, women might be using a communication style they are not accustomed to. This is not easy to do, as we often believe there is only one right way to do things, which is not the case. Both communication styles have their limitations and advantages. The key is for both parties in a conversation to try to understand each other, rather than measuring the other person's behavior against their own standards. Conclusion: well, that's where our interpretation of the essence of this begins. The advantage of being good at reporting style communication is that you can gain more influence, whether in school, the workplace, or even in social activities, quickly gaining prestige and influence. The downside is that reporting style communication can seem cold or intimidating in one-on-one private conversations, and less friendly. For those skilled in reporting style communication, it is important to improve their empathy, appropriately respond to the other person's topics, and seek similarities between both parties. The advantage of being good at emotional style communication is that groups and others often provide tremendous support for you, allowing you to receive help from more people and help more people in return. The downside is that emotional style communication might lead you to overly value feelings, which can be a significant emotional drain for both you and those around you, ultimately harming everyone's feelings. For those skilled in emotional style communication, the most important thing is to enhance their influence within the group, raise their voice, and be willing to express differing opinions. Through this book, we can understand that communication may be a bit complex, but it's not difficult to grasp and is worth our effort to understand. Each seemingly incomprehensible behavior and communication pattern has a reasonable logic behind it, and we can empathize with those around us and unite more people through communication. Lastly, I want to share with you the most inspiring point from the book. Tannen believes that, from a communication perspective, the concept of home has different meanings for men and women. For many men, home means they don't have to use words to intimidate others and gain power. They finally arrive at a place where no one demands them to speak, and they finally have the freedom to be silent. However, for many women, Home is a place where they can freely express themselves, where they want to have heart-to-heart conversations with their loved ones. The comfort of home lies in their ability to speak freely without worrying about being judged. Let's start with the people around us. Based on this definition, how can you make your family members feel more comfortable and happy? Feel free to discuss this in the comments section. Well, that's the essence of this book. If my video has been helpful, please subscribe. Congratulations, you have just finished listening to another book.